Hey everybody, I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock-solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. There's a quote that says, "A warrior's greatest battle is not the one fought on the battlefield, but the one waged within." Well, on today's episode, we're going to talk about developing a warrior mindset, the transformative power of discipline, resiliency, and purpose, essential principles of leadership, and more. My guest is a husband and father, an active duty Green Beret in the U.S. Army Special Forces, a combat wounded warrior, an author, keynote speaker, and an entrepreneur who equips people and organizations to adapt, grow, and thrive in any situation. His list of clients includes the Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Tool, Sherwin Williams, the FBI, the Department of Veteran Affairs, Habitat for Humanity, and so many others. Please welcome the CEO of Precision Components and founder of teammachine, and the man who's inspiring all of us to choose our hard, Nick Lavery. Nick, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Jay, it's my pleasure, brother. And I got to tell you, I've been on quite a bit of these. That has got to be the best intro I have ever heard. You are a true consummate professional, my friend. Nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Nick. And I got to tell you, man, researching you and digging into your content and the way that you show up and serve today, in addition to what you've done in your past, is not only inspiring, man, but it just really helps me take a greater perspective on what more I can do, right? Reaching deep and digging in to find my own potential. And I can't wait for you to share many of your insights and experiences with our audience today. So let's dig right in, man. I thought a good starting point for us, just to kick off the conversation, would be for you to share maybe with all of us, who's been the biggest role model in your life? And when you share that, could you maybe share the impact that individual has had on your life?
Man, that's a great way to start. I'll tell you, and when we do Q&A and we talk on things, people tend to be interested in the extreme or the absolute of any particular topic of discussion. So the greatest, like the most significant, best, worst, these like absolute terms of at the absolute end of the spectrum, where are you at? That's a really hard question to answer because I've got quite a bit. But as you were asking the question in terms of mentorship that I've received, and certainly one of the more powerful ones and impactful ones to me, my father comes to mind very, very quickly. And he certainly would remain towards the top of that list indefinitely. He had me and then my youngest sister not far behind me at a very young age. He was 20. He's a kid. He's a kid raising a kid, then raising another kid, and going through the struggles of trying to figure out how to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies, and still pursue his own passions and purpose in life. And I don't know a whole lot of 20-year-olds that have nailed what that thing or things may be at such a young age. Some find it early. I'd say generally speaking, most of us maybe takes a little bit more life experience, trying things, experiencing some curiosity and getting things wrong, and before you can start to zero in on kind of who you are, who you want to be, what do you want to pursue. So he was battling, both of those things really at the same time. And I just learned so much from him as I continue to do today. I refer to him now, he's my best friend in the world, is my father. Growing up, he was my father, and he led me and disciplined me as a father does. But as you get a little older in life, and our age gap really isn't all that far apart, we've got a really cool, unique relationship where he still, of course, is my father. He's my dad. I respect him as such, but we can have more direct kind of teammate-like discussions on things, and I help him. He helps me. It's a phenomenal dynamic And I'm just truly blessed to have him in my life. My mother as well. So she's right in the conversation. Some of the things that I've taken away from my father specifically is the importance of work ethic. And, he's a very stereotypical, if I were to try to label such, kind of that boomer era of taking a lot of pride in your job and in your work. And, if you're calling in sick, it's because you are on your deathbed or there's like a bone poking out of your skin. I mean, a lot of pride in that and being a worker and showing up and delivering and doing whatever it is you do at your absolute best ability, regardless of what that is. One of the expressions that comes to mind that I will likely forever reflect on, and he would say to me as a very young guy, all the way up through in my teens and 20s is, listen, man, I don't care if you're a ditch digger, but you better be the best ditch digger in the valley. And like that just, that sticks with me, And so the importance of having pride in your work, being a man of your word, when you say you're going to do something, whether you like it or not, whether you feel a sense of passion or purpose with it or not, you said you were going to do it, you show up, you give max effort as possible, and it would take quite a bit to steer him off of those kinds of obligations.
Wow, that's amazing. And I got to tell you, as you're sharing this, it's I can feel the emotion in my own body kind of rising to the surface. So you, of course, don't know this, but yesterday was the 8th month anniversary to the date of my father passing. And your description of your father, the lessons that he taught you, the way that he instilled the work ethic, the love, the commitment to family, all of those things just really lands with me, and something that I remember to this day and will carry with me for the rest of my life. Now, I'm curious, you have your own children. You have two children, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So how do the lessons that you learned from your own father show up in the way that you father and raise your own 2 children?
Yeah, great question. And I have to include my mother in this dynamic as well, who's just a couple years older than my father. So, two very young people trying to figure out how to navigate life and parenthood at a very young age. Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is I attribute a lot of my successes today to my resilience and to my mental toughness, which I would argue are requirements to win in life, no matter what it is you're trying to do, because the world does not cooperate. Adversity is inevitable. Our ability to navigate through that is essential to make it. And I was given the blessing of being exposed to a lot of really challenging times as a young person, and a lot of that stems from my parents, struggling socially, struggling financially, finding work where they could. Oftentimes we were moving. I was relocating just about every single year as a young kid. So I struggled socially, and I struggled to make friends and keep friends. I was this scared, small, insecure kid. And I would come home from school on most days with tears streaming down my face, or beat up physically or emotionally or mentally. And my parents somehow had this amazing foresight. Although when you talk to them today, they would tell you that they really didn't know exactly what they were doing. They were just doing the best that they could. But they would give me guidance, and they would give me advice, and they would let me know that I was in a place of love and safety in our home. But they didn't keep me in this force field protective bubble, because they would give me that mentorship, and then they would send me right back out into the game the next day. And we would go that round and around and around. And we would refer to this as conditioning, which we know maybe more easily as it pertains to like physical training. If you're going to get on the assault bike and just destroy yourself physically, you condition your body to be able to do more and endure more over time. Mentally, it's really done the exact same way. I was getting a lot of those reps in of love, guidance, protection, back out, struggle, discomfort, suffering, and repeat over and over and over again. And I give an enormous amount of my ability to be where I am today and the things I've navigated through today to them and those experiences. Now, of course, going through it in real time, you can't have that perspective, a word you mentioned already. at that young age. It's just, it's tough. It sucks. Like this can't get over fast enough. But I can of course look back now, hindsight being what it is, and being like, man, I'm almost certainly not the man I am today. Haven't done the things I've done today had I not had all those reps of mental toughness combined with phenomenal mentorship and protection from two amazing human beings. So now as a parent, as a father of two young boys, our oldest is 7 going on 8. Our youngest just turned 4. I'm reminded of that because I think if you're trying to build a capable human, the last thing you may want to do is rob them of struggle and discomfort and failure and setback. You have to expose them to those things. And that can be really difficult to do as a parent, particularly of younger people, but probably parent at any age, where you have this genetic drive to protect them. So when they're hurt or when they're struggling or when there's a pending threat coming towards them, you want to stand in between you and that potential problem. You want to bandage them back up. You want to blanket them in warmth and love, which of course we do. But I think you also have to be strategic and then tactical about where and when do you step in and be cautious of not robbing them of these essential reps in building physical and mental toughness. One of the quotes I come back to is from Jordan Peterson, and I may botch it verbatim, but you'll get the spirit of what I'm saying, where he says, if you want to ensure the failure of your children, stop them while they're doing dangerous things carefully. And I just think that that's so brilliantly stated, because my sentiment from that is when you notice them doing something somewhat dangerous, is it reckless or is there some sense of tactics that you see involved? Are they thinking through the problem? Are they analyzing things at all? Or is there absolutely no thought into the potential disaster that could be happening? And maybe if you notice that there's some calculation going on, perhaps you let that one ride out a little bit. Of course, situational dependent, we have to decide where and when to step in, but I'm just cognizant of the importance of allowing my kids, my boys, to be exposed to discomfort, pain at times, failure, setbacks, and struggle, whether that's them climbing a tree and they're 20 feet off the ground. And I'm like, hey man, Isaac Newton, he knew a thing or two. Like that's where this ends up. Like, have you really, like, where are you going to go from there, man? You're kind of out of branches. Or if, he's struggling to tie his shoe and I want to just be like, come on, man, we got to go. Like, you know what, let me just do it for you. And like, let's just get out of here. It's like, maybe you let him suffer through that a little bit to learn how to do it through a little bit of pain and discomfort. So I just think that we as parents, we have the mission and amazing responsibility to build strong, capable, compassionate savages that are driven by ambition and integrity. And if that is the goal, we need to let them go through some struggle and failure and setbacks at times.
Yeah, now that is so powerful, and I'm glad you gave the example, because I was going to ask you, in your own personal life, where do you start? What's going through your mind in terms of finding that, I don't want to say balance, because that's not the right word to use, but find that line where, yes, I want my own child to go through the struggle, right? Because there's lessons that come out of that. That's how we forge strength and resilience capabilities and be able to find our own potential, yet at the same time being able to being able to find some safety in there as well, right? Because we don't want them to get hurt to the point where it causes a significant problem. So you talked about the tree, right? No limbs up in on top of you at this point. You're already 20 feet up in the air. What are you going to do now, right? So thinking, is there another example that you could give, a real world example where you're thinking about all of those variables that you just shared with us? And also, I'd be really interested to find out from you, since you have 2 boys. I don't like to play the what ifs, but if you had 2 daughters or a daughter, would the situation be the same in terms of what you would, at what point would the struggle end and you would come to help or provide some assistance, let's say?
Yeah, and I think you asked 2 great questions right there. Another example that comes to mind, and again, a 7-year-old who'll be 8 next month, or actually in a couple of weeks, and then one who just turned 4. So a 4-year age gap, pretty significant. My oldest has my size without question. He's a big, lumbering bull in a china shop. He's a huge kid for his age. And my younger one doesn't quite have that size, but he's crafty and he's slick with his words, and he's starting to learn how he can negotiate this obstacle that is his big brother, who's 4 years older and 5 times the size. Like, how do I get what I need from this guy who can just debo me physically whenever he wants? And there was a situation that just happened, Jay. I'm not kidding. This was about a week ago. And my oldest is giving his younger brother a hard time, which, that's what siblings do. And you're used to it. And Vin, who's the youngest one, he's telling, Dom, the older one, like, leave me alone, get away from me. And I'm like, Dom, like leave him alone, man. Like, what are you doing? And he just kind of, yeah, whatever, Dad. And he's like pressing his buttons and doing his thing. Well, Vin can't really square up physically because his brother's way too big. So what does Vin do? And all this unveils right in front of my eyes. I'm in the kitchen, they're in the living room. They're fighting over this like plastic toy. And Vin hits his threshold and he cocks back and he just drills his older brother with this plastic, like little baton, square in the mouth. Boom. Like my oldest, like his lip busts open, blood's coming out of him. Nothing catastrophic, but now they're both crying. Okay. Older one's crying. He was just hurt. There's blood. The younger one's crying because, like, oh my gosh, I just broke my brother's face open. And I'm sitting there. I watch this whole thing unfold. My wife comes around the corner. She's like, what's going on? I was like, yeah. She's like looking at me like, did you not see? I'm like, no, I watched the whole thing happen. It's just, this is where things played out. I let this one ride. So we kind of separate them. And I have a great opportunity to go talk to my oldest and go, hey, man, like, he's younger than you, but like he's going to defend himself. And you pushed him into a corner, literally and figuratively, and he lashed out. Now, hurting people is not a good thing, but I do believe that there is a time in which you need to defend yourself. He felt like he was at that point. Okay, he's 4 years old, so you got to give him a little bit of grace. And Dom, the older one, was like, yep, I guess I kind of get it. And then I could have a different conversation with my youngest, excuse me, saying, hey, man, was that necessary? And, at the time he was 3, he's like not really quite getting it. But I'm like, listen, you got to defend yourself at times. Maybe you don't crack him in the face with like a weapon, So just another example of these are those moments. And I don't think there's a clear cut black and white. I don't think it exists. I don't think we can come up with any kind of metrics for any of us to have as a guide to say, nope, this is the time to step in. You got to feel it out. I think if you got the framework and the philosophy, then that's as detailed as it's probably going to get. But I think that you got to be paying attention. And that's where a lot of us can just miss it because we're on our phones, we're in our emails, life is throwing a million things at us. You got to be present and there, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally to be able to assess kind of what's happening. The second part of your question, what if I had daughters? I really do love kind of playing this theoretical conversation. Obviously, I have no clue. I'd say I got a decent vantage point. My brother-in-law, who's also a fellow Green Beret, so my wife's brother, we're in the same unit. He lives right down the street, and he's got 2 daughters that are almost the exact same ages of my sons. And they almost have a more brother-sister type relationship because they're just around each other so often. And I can tell you right now, and again, it's different. These are my nieces. They're not my daughters. I can tell you right now that if all things were equal, and my son, my oldest son, and my oldest niece, let's say we're both running along a line, and they both were to wipe out on the concrete, 99.99% certainty I'm running straight to my niece. I'm going to pick her up. I'm going to hold her. I'm going to kiss on her and love on her and see if she's okay. And I'm going to look over my son and be like, get up. Like, what did you think was going to happen? You tripped over a stump or like whatever. Like that literal example has happened. So okay. I'd like to think that my parenting would be gender irrelevant, but odds are I would probably be a much bigger, squishier teddy bear if I were to have daughters.
Well, I appreciate your honesty there, and I get that. I truly do get that. And it's kind of funny how theoretically we think that, well, I would probably treat them the same, or at least I would do my best to treat them the same. But when the reality hits, it's like, oh gosh, it's like another instinct comes into practice, right, or comes into play. That's so interesting. So I'm just curious here. You today, obviously, you have the benefit of perspective, right? Perspective of time. So what you just described in terms of your own 2 sons and how you handle certain situations and how you can think, right? You can kind of think through a situation and not automatically react to it, right? You can think about it, pause, and make some calculated and maybe sometimes not calculated decisions. at what point, let me, instead of asking that question, have you always been that way? Or was there a time in your life where, man, something happens, boom, reaction, you just go after it, and whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, the short answer, Jay, is I have absolutely not always been this way. As a young person, I was very stereotypical, emotionally charged decision making, and unfortunately for me, that lasted a lot longer than I'm really proud to say. As I got older, into my teens, into my early 20s, I was in college, I was a football player, and I really started to grow physically, and I was eager to experience what things were like on the other end of this fear spectrum, having spent most of my time as a kid scared, and now I'm this big, strong, capable human. I was thriving on being able to instill fear in others, and it's not something I'm proud of, but it is the hard truth. And I was much more emotionally driven with the decisions that I would make. I would say that the increase of my emotional regulation, which is a skill, and it's actually an incredibly important one. I could in fact make the argument that the differentiator between the elite or the greats and everybody else is emotional control. It's emotional regulation. This is a theme that we talk particularly with our real high performing individuals, like pro sports, pro athletes, Fortune 100 companies. These are people with like multi-millions on the line, like huge commodities. It's like that's the differentiator, is can you control your emotions in real time? And it's important to note that us in special operations, pro athletes, like choose your person, we're not emotionless creatures. That's a huge misconception. If you think of Green Berets or Navy SEALs or combat controllers, Delta Force operators, that we're these like emotionless beings, which is of course completely and totally inaccurate. We're not fearless. We're not emotionless. We just have learned over time how to control those and wield emotion at our disposal when we choose to, because it's in our benefit. We just don't let it control what we do most of the time. That's what makes us capable of performing, under enormous amounts of stress and pressure when it's literally a life or death situation. This was learned. This is learned behavior over time. It begins in training, but then I think more so, like with most things in life, you really learn it once you go live and you start getting those live reps. And I've had, an amazing career over the last almost, 2 decades of a variety of different experiences and different environments, from the extreme, in your face gunfight type stuff to a lot more subtle types of environments and operations. So it's learned behavior over time. No, I was not always this way. And really the skill, to just summarize it quickly again, isn't to get rid of it, but what we're really trying to do is shorten the time horizon between an emotional reaction and a logical response. And those are two entirely different things. Reactions are almost always emotionally charged because we are emotional creatures. Dale Carnegie says it great. When you're dealing with a human being, you're not dealing with a creature of logic, you're dealing with a creature of emotion. It's one of the things that makes us the most powerful, dominant species on planet Earth, and also opens us up to a massive vulnerability and potentially huge problems, is because of the exact same thing. We're not trying to eliminate the emotion. That's going to be present. Reactions typically are emotionally driven. Responses, once we develop the skill, now we're introducing logic. And the real question is, how much time exists between the reaction and the response? And with enough reps and deliberate, purposeful practice and getting those live events under your belt, you start to, over time, shorten that time horizon where you may have that quick knee-jerk emotional, like I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm scared, whatever the thing is. But then I can very quickly move to objectivity, move to logic, detach from the emotion to make a sound decision, response, and then boom, execute.
Okay, so let me pause for just a moment, because you have been sharing here over the past couple of minutes, actually throughout the whole conversation, but up to this point, the past couple of minutes, something that is incredibly important for all of you that are watching and listening right now. And I am going to encourage you to rewind and go back and re-listen to when Nick first starts talking about emotional regulation. Now, Nick, you went over tactically some things very quickly. But I want to back up just a hair, because I want to give our audience, through your experience, your knowledge, and your wisdom, some things that they can start to apply in their lives, whether it's personal, professional, relational, whatever it happens to be, some things that they can do to create that space between the stimulus and the response. Share a little bit about what you have learned. Obviously, tons of repetition, tons of training. But if you break it down and distill it, this is some of the work that you do every single day with high performers, with teams, with businesses, with nonprofits, with sports agencies, etc. What can we do? What's a good, simple starting point?
Two things come to mind. One is this is a crawl, walk, run approach, like it is to most things. I think if you set the expectation too far, too soon, what is going to happen is it's unsustainable and the wheels fall off. Meaning, as an example, if I want to get into good physical shape, I want to tighten up my diet or my nutrition, I'm going to find like the perfect program to follow down to the gram of protein and per calorie. And here's what it is. But it's just miles from where you are today. And chances are you may do that for a day or two or a week or two. It's just too much too soon. And then the wheels slowly fall off or just immediately fall off and you go right back to where you were. Small incremental growth over time. That's the game. So if I want to be more productive, if I currently wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, moving that to 3:30 a.m. is probably too much. Step one, you're at 7. Cool. We're going to go to 6:55. We're going to do that for a week. You won't even notice the difference. Next week, 6:50, 6:45, 6:40. Give me 3 months and boom, you're at 5 a.m. and you haven't noticed the difference. It's very small victories stacked up over time, like compounding interest. I think if we're trying to build really any skill, and again, I would argue that emotional regulation is a skill, I think we take the exact same approach. And fortunately, because the world doesn't cooperate, rarely, we are met with countless opportunities where we are met with an emotional reaction. It's going to happen almost every single day, assuming you're out living life. This is going to happen. One of the examples I give people, because it's quite common, is on your commute to work, whatever that is. Whether you're driving, you're taking the bus, you're taking the train, you're walking, chances are someone is going to do something moronic around you on the way to or from work on most days. I would argue that's the case. A bike messenger cuts you off. Some dude's doing 60 on the highway, does a 3-lane passover, not even paying attention. And you have that immediate emotional kind of road rage indicator of like, oh, you grip the steering wheel, you're screaming, you're honking, your finger goes out the window. And of course, that could escalate to being quite dangerous very, very quickly. Anticipate it. Here's a window of time where you can be almost certain that this is going to happen. If it doesn't, no problem. It's probably going to happen the next time. But you go into those moments with a training mentality. When this happens, when the guy cuts me off, when the guy honks the horn, when the dude jams on his brakes at a yellow light, which by the way, in Boston, that just means put your foot all the way to the floor and get through before it turns red. When that happens, you're in the game. The game is now being played. You've been waiting for it. Here you are, and you got about 4 seconds to decide how you want to play it. But if you're anticipating it and you see the value in going through that one rep and stacking that up over time, like those little small victories, whether it's the alarm clock or the calories, that's how you're able to tackle bigger and more impactful stress moments, emotionally driven moments as you build and climb that ladder incrementally.
That is so good. And you can take that example that you just gave of the commute, right? And you can apply that to anything, right? You find the thing that can trigger those emotional responses, and start small, right? To your point, the small things become the big things. And another phrase that you use, compounding, right? When we're able to stack these learnings on top of one another over time and through repetition and through discipline, it makes a tremendous difference. So when you're working with corporate leaders, let's say as an example, let's just take any of the businesses that you deal with, and you're helping corporate leaders, high-performing teams to be able to make better decisions, to be able to either slow the process down, whatever that mechanism looks like, what would typically be for you a starting point for them, right? So we want to start small, right? We don't want to give them something that, they have to eat the entire elephant at one time, right? Let's break it down. But what would be a good starting point when it comes to decision making and being able to be more thoughtful and more intentional about our decisions?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to go macro to micro quickly, I would just use almost the cliche expression, more tends to be lost by indecision than the wrong decision. So, paralysis by analysis is something that we've all fallen victim to, and that's a very easy thing to happen. And a lot of that is risk mitigation, risk calculus. I'm just going to analyze, and you can find yourself stuck for an extended period of time where it's like, it's a risk regardless. There's some risk by doing it. There's a risk by not doing it. There's a risk by doing something else. Like, welcome to the world. It's not to say that we're reckless, but a lot of that value is going to come by virtue of execution and then learning from the failure. So I think, again, talking more conceptually and metaphorically, it's recognizing that failure is where most of the wisdom is located and being willing to take a shot. Like, that's where the knowledge tends to exist. Most of the things, Jay, you and I are able to do right now, what we know to be true, comes largely by virtue of getting things wrong. I ask people when I'm in a room, like, how did you learn how to walk? And they're like, well, I fell down a whole bunch of times. It's like, yeah, exactly. That's how we all learned how to walk. I had that same lesson twice, and it proved to be equally true both times. So you got to be willing to take a shot. You got to be willing to take the hits. And when it doesn't play out the way that you hoped or wanted, like, it's just an amazing opportunity to learn. And if you grasp that wisdom, which comes deliberately by virtue of analysis versus dwelling, which are two entirely different things, if you go into analysis mode and say, you know what, that stung, it hurts. Failing hurts, right? But it needs to. That pain is the catalyst to reach in and grab onto the wisdom. You take that and you ram it back into the system, maybe make an adjustment or two, and you go again and again and again and again and again. And I typically will ask almost the rhetorical question, like, how do you stop somebody who not only is going to get back up when they get knocked down, but they're going to get smarter and stronger every time you do it? And the answer to the question is you cannot. You've created an unstoppable weapon of mass destruction. So fear is a powerful driver. I totally get that. Hesitation then can come into play. I get that. I'm not suggesting recklessness. I think there's value in strategy and tactics. But at the end of the day, you got to make a decision. You got to send it. And that's where the wisdom is located. And if you recognize the value of getting things wrong, boom, like, now you're creating an absolute maniac or a crazy performing team. And then another element that I think comes into this discussion, and there's a lot, but two that jump out to mind, is the development of confidence in a person. And, I think a more confident person is more willing to take those shots and then more willing to take on the failure and the external judgment and the internal judgment and any of the embarrassment that may come with landing on your face. Confidence can breed that. And I want to be very clear, in my opinion, screaming positive affirmations into the mirror is not authentic confidence. Now, I'm all for positive self-talk. I've done that exact thing at times. The first time before I jumped out of a plane, I was literally staring at myself in the mirror, giving myself this like pep talk that you can do this, because I was about to do something that defies the laws of being a human being as land walking mammals. So it can help, but I wouldn't say that's actual confidence. I would say legitimate confidence comes by virtue of skill. So a lot of deliberate reps in a particular craft. It comes by virtue of having an undeniable objective track record of doing hard shit, period. Do I consistently and deliberately and strategically do hard things? I may not know how this thing's going to play out, but I know that I can do hard things because it's an undeniable truth. It's not nonsense. I'm not telling myself a fabrication. I know it's real. Now it's going to enable me to actually execute. So I think when you start to build confidence, which can be done by virtue of physical training, your emotional well-being, your mindset, your relationships, how you look at yourself in the mirror, the things you're attacking, your goals, your milestones. I think when that just becomes the way you live, couple that with the recognition of the value of failure and that more is lost by indecision, puts a person at least in a good position to start making those hard choices a little bit faster and a little bit more on target.
Man, that is so good. So you brought up, you've talked about fear and you've mentioned it a couple of times, actually more than twice in our conversation, and I think it's important to at least have you address this for a moment, in that we see on social media and marketing, advertisements, etc., no fear, right? Talk about why fear is important and how it has personally helped you throughout different times of your life and your career. And do you agree that we need to have a level of fear, or do you have the mindset of no fear, I'm just going into it no matter what?
No. I think the whole no fear thing, it's captivating and gets people's hearts pumping, which is smart and savvy. It's also completely and totally inaccurate. Fear is a powerful and important tool that makes us human beings. It's actually essential. And 99.99% of us have it. Those that don't have an actual neurological condition that blocks that. And that's a huge problem for that 0.001% of people walking the planet Earth right now. Fear is the indicator of a potential threat. That's what fear is. It's part of this internal security system we have built within us that sends us these different alerts that something is pending. Pain and fear being two of the more noticeable ones. When something is causing damage to the system, it sends me an alert known as pain. Now, it could be emotional pain, it could be physical pain. Those are slightly different, but it's pain, it's discomfort. Hey, this doesn't feel good. You're damaging the system. Get your hand off of the hot stove. Fear is another alert of, that looks like it could be a threat to the system. These are all rooted in survival. That's why we have these indicators. Is the brain's number one responsibility is that of our survival. That's it. So fear is a very important tool. When it gets difficult is when do you decide to listen to that alert? And here's where it gets really hot. And there's no clear-cut answer to the question. Much like raising your kids, you got to make an assessment. You got to make a call, because if I'm pursuing, a 600-pound back squat, and for the first time I'm going to try to move, 550, and I've never touched that weight before, that's a scary place to be. I've been in that situation literally, and that's a lot of weight. That could cause a lot of damage. I don't know. It's scary. Are you willing to disregard that alert known as fear in that moment to pursue the goal? Yes or no? Individual choice. If I'm on a hike through the woods and I see a bear walking down the trail and I get that same fear alert, probably want to listen to that one. That thing could cause some serious damage. It's not like, no fear, just keep walking right by that thing. In fact, walk up to it and slap it in the face and let them know who's boss. Good luck playing the game that way. So this becomes the challenge. When do I listen to it? When do I not? And, we live in the world that I live in now almost 20 years as a special operator. There is no such thing as courage without fear. That's it. If you want to be courageous, if you want to be brave, that requires fear in order to act that way. So fear is a very powerful tool. It helps protect us. And lastly, to this point, because I could go on for days about fear, is I think we have a great opportunity to flip it on its head at times. Maybe not with the black bear scenario, maybe with the back squat scenario, or asking the girl to marry you scenario, which is really scary. I've been there. It's like, man, what if she says no? What if? We can do this all day long. It's a scary moment in time. I don't care how tough you are, how big you are, what kind of tattoos you have. It's a scary moment. Okay. This is scary. I'm going to flip fear around. What scares me more? This act right here or the fear of regret? Meaning if I don't do it, if I succumb to the fear and I say, I'm going to listen to this alert, I'm going to walk the other way. I'm going to walk away from the back squat. I'm going to walk away from the girl. What scares me more? The potential result of getting it wrong or of failure. The weight crumbles down on top of me. Hopefully my spotter's there. She says no. It's all scary. Or am I more scared of in a month or a year or 10 years, looking back on right now, having not done it, going, man, what if I had just sent it? What if? And that's the question, Jay. It's the what if question. What if? The differentiator, and I'll stop here, is that question can come from our brain or it can come from our heart or our soul. What if from our brain is thinking about all the hazards and all the damage that this could cause because our brain wants to protect us. That's giving us all the what ifs as to why to not do the thing. The heart is asking the same exact question, only from the other lens. Well, what if she says yes? What if you get under the 550, you go down and you explode off the floor, boom, and you nail it? What if? It's the same question. It's just, is it coming from your brain? Is it coming from your heart? Chances are it's coming from both at the exact same time. Which one are you going to listen to? That's the question.
Ooh. That is so good and so deep and such a great question for us to ask ourselves in those situations. So with that said, thinking of questions and powerful questions, I think it was Tony Robbins, and I'll probably butcher this, but Tony Robbins said the quality of our questions impact the quality of our lives, right? And I believe that there's definitely some truth to that. So what are one or two bigger questions that you're asking yourself today? It could be questions about life. It could be questions about, your business, anything, but big questions that you're contemplating on that are really landing with you that you don't have the answer yet today, but you're thinking about them.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is really revolved around the word legacy, meaning, how will I be remembered? What type of impact will I leave on people when I'm no longer around? And I got to be honest with you, man, for most of my life, the idea of legacy was a very shallow, self-centered, egotistical thing to be considering and thinking about.
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Yeah, like the idea that I'm going to live a certain way so that I could be glorified by people around the world. They could build a statue, in Boston to go, think about me when I was here. Just seemed very, very self-centered. And I just thought, man, I'm here to live my life on my terms based on my passions and purpose. Like, it doesn't matter. And it wasn't until literally 3 days before I was about to be a father, as I'm sitting at my kitchen table, about 2:00 in the morning, can't sleep, a little bit of bourbon, and I'm trying to think about, man, how am I going to do this, right? I'm a special forces operator. I'm on a team. I know I got a deployment coming up. I'm about to be a dad. Like, it's scary. It's like all these things. And that was where that started to change for me, the term legacy, because it wasn't about the masses per se glorifying me for whatever reason. It was about the impact on this kid. Like, that's where it started. It was that one little dude that didn't quite exist yet. It was like, no, how's he going to remember me? How am I going to impact that little guy? And then it expanded beyond my oldest son. Of course, I have another son, but I have my spouse, I have my friends, my teammates. So it's expanded into kind of my inner circle. That's legacy. That's the power of legacy. It's not about yourself. It's about others. So that changed the dynamic for me quite a bit. So things that I think about now is along those lines. How will I be remembered? And both my boys help kind of ground me as a specific example in this discussion. But again, I think it exists beyond that. And this isn't isolated solely to those of us that have kids. It's just the people in your life, the people that you care for, that care for you, the people that you trust, that help guide you, that you guide, our proteges, our mentors, our allies, like our community. How are you impacting them? How will they remember you? How will they talk about you? Whether you're in the room and you're still very much alive, or you've long since passed and you're going to meet them at a later point in time, at a later place in time. So, I keep that in mind for me, Jay, because especially in business, we can get very target fixated on KPIs and metrics and top line, bottom line, and all these milestones. And I live in the world, and these are great things. But I think if we start to sacrifice our integrity, our values, our morals, even if we were to stack up those wins, and it's a cutthroat world that we live in. You and I both know this, man. Someone else, probably a lot of someone else's, are out there trying to take what's yours. And it's a knife fight on most days. But if you start to sacrifice who you are and the way you go about living and how you stack up those wins, you could have a list of victories. And at the end of this game, you look back going, man, I got all these things and all this money and all this stuff and clients and member, whatever. But I trashed who I am, and I destroyed relationships around me during that process, which is why I have a problem with the kind of whatever it takes mentality or statement. That's very captivating. It reads great on an Instagram caption, but I add a little twist to that myself, which is doing whatever it takes by any righteous means necessary. If you go about living your life that way in business and your personal lives and your athletic pursuits, whatever, it is going to be more difficult to win. You have to know that going in. If you're going to do things the right way, ethically, legally, morally, it's going to be more difficult to win because not everybody operates underneath those same guidelines. But I would argue that that is a differentiator. And I'm willing to make less money. I'm willing to scale slower. I'm willing to stall at times to do things the right way, even though others aren't. Because at the end of the day, I want to be able to look myself in the mirror, look my kids in the mirror, in the face, and say, this is how I operate. This is how I suggest you operate. And it's an undeniable track record of me doing so today and then, once I'm gone.
Oh, gosh. That is incredible. That's so good, Nick. It makes me think of a saying that is by Jeff Hoffman, who is the founder of Priceline.com. And Jeff says something along the lines of, you may be successful, but do you matter? But do you matter? And man, I'm telling you, you were talking about this, but I think about so many seasons of my life where I was driven by ego, money, titles, chasing things that I thought mattered, showing up a way that I thought others needed me to show up as, that weren't aligned with my true values. And I needed to go through that, right? We talked about going through the challenge, going through the adversity, going through the stuff that life gives us in order to become the person who we are today, to learn those valuable lessons. But what I wasn't doing before is I was not doing the things that really mattered. And you talk about legacy, dude. I mean, it took the birth of your oldest child to get you to think about legacy in a way that you hadn't necessarily had done before, because it's always about something bigger than you, bigger than me, and it impacts so many more people. So I'm so glad that you shared that. As we are wrapping up our conversation today, I could literally talk to you for hours.
Easily.
Yeah. I want to talk about for just a moment, because I want our audience to hear from you about drive. It's been somewhat of an undercurrent throughout parts of our conversation here today, but when people learn more about your story, and there's plenty of content out there that people can go to hear all about your story, your military service. Obviously, you're still serving today, right? But they can hear that part of your story. But there's something about you, and many others as well, but there's something about you and drive that keeps you moving forward. And here's what I'd like you to share if you could. First, for you personally, where does that drive come from? But then most importantly, is that something that you believe that we're born with, or is it something that we can learn? Or is it a combination of the two? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, two phenomenal questions. The first one, where does my drive come from? And I think it's a layered response, but I would say at the core is, Jay, I should have died now like multiple different times in combat, multiple different times from multiple different injuries that I sustained. And by the grace of God, and with the help of a lot of amazing people along the way, you and I are having this conversation today. I'm not supposed to be here today, according to the laws of biology and physiology and military survivability statistics. I break all of those rules. And as you mentioned, there's plenty of places to go to get a little bit more in depth into some of the things I'm talking about. But I will forever keep that into my heart, is that every day truly is a blessing. And that may sound cliche and corny and kittens and rainbows. That's fine, because it's absolutely true. Every day we wake up is a blessing. We never know when it's going to end, but we do know it is going to end. My wife has the tattoo Memento Mori on her arm, which is Latin for "we are mortal," which I think is an incredibly powerful gift. You got it literally right there in front of you. It's an incredibly powerful gift that we've been given, is the fact that we're mortal, and this is a finite game. So if we decide to accept the truth that the game is finite and that it is a gift, it positions us to, I think, maximize every moment we have. And it doesn't mean it's all going to be easy. In fact, a lot of it's going to be really hard. But why not leave it all out on the table? Why not leave it all out on the field? If you know it's going to end, why not go big, go huge? You know, at the end of the day, why sell yourself short? And I think about this moment of me standing at the gates, and you know, I'm talking to a higher entity or a being, and there's this like display of what Nick could have been, and it's got metrics and like all this data, and I'm looking at this thing going, man, like I was supposed to do that, and this entity's like, you could have, you know, like it's, you know, we gave you free will, which is the power to choose. It's the same superpower that we all have as human beings, is free will, the ability to choose. And this is who you could have been. And I'm like, ooh, you know, I kind of came up short, you know. And this is, of course, a theoretical, biblical, spiritual kind of journey I put myself on at times. But I use that as kind of a beacon where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do my best. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to live every day to try to not only get to that point, but actually surpass that. I want to get to that point in time, been like, that's what I could have been. Here's what I actually was. And like have the whole area be like, dude, this dude went way overboard, you know? So that's kind of where I've set my sights, because I've been given an amazing gift. And that gift is perspective, that I'm not supposed to be here. Neither of my kids are supposed to be here. Yet here we are. So I find myself asking the question as to why, you know, why me? And I'm an unapologetic Christian. I'm not pushing religion down anybody's throat, but like I find myself asking that question, and I feel like I've got the answer, which is that I have a lot of work here left to do. I have a strong passion and purpose for impacting people's lives, and I get to live every day, you know, in pursuit of that.
I love it. So I want to go back to the second part of that drive. Is that something that we can learn? Is that
100%.
something that we're born with, or
Great
we
question.
can learn it?
Yeah, I apologize for the second part. Great
No
question.
worries.
Thank you for bringing this back up. Some drivers are organic or are genetic to us, and these are ones that are rooted in survival. Again, we talked about the brain, survival. The three more powerful ones, and we teach a curriculum on this exact topic. The three more powerful external or extrinsic drivers, which are all connected by virtue of survival, is money, sex, and status. And those are driven by survival. Money, because that's how most people are getting provisions for food, shelter, water, electricity, clothing. Most people acquire the things we need to survive by virtue of money. Sex, which is just part of the incentive to ensure the survival of our species. So we're driven towards that genetically. And then status, because it increases the likelihood of both of those other two things happening. Many people are like, hey, I don't care about status. I don't care about fame. It's like, yeah, you might not consciously, but subconsciously, at a minimum, it's there because it increases the likelihood of the other two. Those are extrinsic, external drivers that are given to us by virtue of being human beings. But there's a threshold on really all three of those where once you go past that point, and we can use dollar signs, although that number moves across time. But once you go across that threshold, let's say it's a salary, where all your basic needs are being met, as you increase up on what that number is, it doesn't have the same effect on increasing the drive because you've met the minimum. Like, I'm good survival-wise. Yeah, I may want more money because I could do more things with it. It's all great, you know, but it doesn't increase the value of the drive. So I would say those are genetic, those are given to us. I'd say more of the internal drivers, which are also, I think, part of our DNA, but I think you learn them over time. Here's where the magic happens. And the question is, do you choose to operationalize these things? We're talking about curiosity, a very powerful internal intrinsic driver is just the willingness and interest to try new things. Passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery. These 5 drivers are incredibly powerful, and there's no limit on them like there is with the external ones. You can continue to ride that indefinitely. To bring this back to me, as it was really your question, out of those ones, and I'm driven towards all 5. I know my passion is there. I love what I get to do in the uniform, out of the uniform, with my family. I'm so blessed. I live a life full of passion. That cup is almost completely overflowing. I've identified what my purpose is. For a long time, it was that of a professional warfighter on behalf of a society. And since it has kind of evolved, And I've added more to that as I've started my business and we get to work with people all over the world. The other ones is, I think, more conscious for me, the pursuit of mastery and the pursuit of autonomy. I think a lot of people go into the entrepreneurial business world because they want autonomy. Like, I want to be able to make my choices. So this is my thing. I choose. What do I do? Who do I do it with? Who do I do it for? Who do I surround myself with? You likely have that as part of your driver if you're going to enter into this insane, crazy, challenging world of entrepreneurship and business. Mastery for me is what typically sticks out. And it's something that will go on forever. And I'll quote Miyamoto Musashi from the Book of Five Rings, where he says, the differentiator between masters and the average is masters recognize that the pursuit of mastery is indefinite. And just the mere acceptance of that truth will automatically put people into two separate buckets. The crazies that are willing to pursue something forever, knowing they'll never reach it, and then your more normal humans, which isn't a derogatory term, it's just math, that are like, indefinitely, like, that sounds like a really long time. And it's like, no, that's like all of the time. And it's like, yeah, I'm good with that. Like, mastery isn't for me. Here's my ceiling. Here's my limitation. I'm good with average. I just want things nice and predictable. And that's great. No problem. Do your thing. I'm not telling anybody how to live. But those of us that are driven more towards that mastery world, as Miyamoto Musashi states, you got to know it's a ride that goes on indefinitely. And you will forever remain a student of the game. And the instant you think you've hit your limit, or you've hit the peak of that mountain, is the instant that you are no longer in the realm of mastery. That's it. That's the hard truth. And so I find myself living this life of really never being satisfied, but that's wildly different than fulfillment. I am incredibly fulfilled. I live an enormously fulfilled life, but I'm really not content with any of it. So my marriage, me as a father, me as a business operator, me as a soldier, I'm continuously pursuing to want to be better at all those things. It can be a blessing and a curse. It's a double-edged sword. But for me, that's really how I go about living my life, man.
Man, amazing. This is so good. You've got me thinking about so many things that I want to explore for myself, things that I want to be able to do to serve others as well. But you really have me thinking more deeply about specific areas, and I want to thank you for that. So I've got one final question for you and then one ask, and here is my final question to you. If you were to distill your life's work up to this point, distill your life's work into one sentence, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you think that one sentence would be?
Life's work into one sentence. I would say it has been a life lived of enormous mistakes, setbacks, failures, and by virtue of those, coupled with eventually finding a positive direction to push my skills and capabilities within, I have been able to live a life of fulfillment, growth, empowering others, and have had the opportunity to build a legacy that I aspire to last long beyond my time on this planet, to continue to positively affect others. I think that was one sentence. Was that one sentence?
Wow.
There might have been a comma.
We'll call it a run-on sentence.
There might have been a comma or two.
It was a comma, but it was whoa, that was good. All right, so I'm going to give that back to you as a recording so you can write that down.
Thank you.
That was a powerful sentence that distills your life work. I mean, that's amazing to be able to articulate it that way. That means to me that you are clear on your purpose, that you're clear on your values, that you've got vision as to where you've been and where you're going. And I love that so much. So here is my ask, Nick.
Yes,
I would
sir.
love it if you would give all of us, everyone that's watching and listening right now, and me, one challenge. What is one thing that you would challenge us to do starting today?
I think at the foundation of human performance and growth and goal achievement is a word, Jay, that you actually mentioned already in this call, and that's the word discipline. I would begin making significant knowing that that's measurable and on a scale, investments into disciplined behavior, and recognize that while I may be motivating people right now, motivation is fleeting. That's my greatest problem with it. Motivation comes and goes. The people that win with consistency are those that execute, particularly when they don't feel like it. So begin small, whether that's the time you get out of bed, whether that's that new exercise routine, whether that's cleaning up your diet or your nutrition, whether that's leaning into your marriage, your personal relationships. There's probably a lot of work to be done, and that work will continue to stack up over time. So small incremental wins, again, is how it's done. Pick a sector of your world, your social life, your professional life, your physical life, your goal, your hobbies, your passion projects. Pick one sector, one area, just to start. How can you get a little bit more disciplined? I think that's the question that if we all continue to ask ourselves that question, it just continues to go and go and go. But that I would put as the foundation for the framework of a warrior mindset and for goal achievement in general.
Beautifully said. All right. And I hope that every single one of you right now are saying out loud, challenge accepted.
Game on.
Make sure that you are listening to what Nick said, but not only listening, but you're taking action, right? Because nothing happens until you actually attach action to those thoughts and to those words. Nick, I want to thank you so very much for joining me today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. Man, what an extraordinary conversation. I asked you off camera before the mics were rolling at the very beginning, what would make this an extraordinary conversation for you? And let me tell you something, my man. Whatever your response was, and I know what you said to me, but you have made this an extraordinary conversation for me and for everyone that's watching and listening right now. So much insight, so much wisdom. Thank you for exposing more of your heart, for telling some of your personal story, and doing it in such an authentic and incredible way. I know why you're making such an impact in this world, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely. And for all of you, I want to thank you so very much for watching and for listening. Do have a quick favor. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us expand our reach and attract amazing guests just like Nick. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And until next time, my friends, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure you run out to pick up a copy of Objectivesecure, which we'll put the link in the show notes. That is Nick's book. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.